the girl who survived the earth, a heartbreaking tale of karma, family, and spiritual rebirth. The evening light spilled onto the ground like diluted blood. At that moment, in an ancient land on the western edge of Sham, where the wind carried the golden dust of the desert and centuries of memory, a quiet shift was taking place. Something was being born, a soul that had not yet taken its first breath. Asif, the wealthiest merchant in the region, had just stepped out of his vast wooden house. His eyes burned bright like fire. Inside, his wife Gulbadan was still in labor, drenched in sweat, clutching tightly to a frayed towel. The newborn's cry rang out, a prelude to life. But to Asif, it sounded only like the shattering of glory. He didn't enter the room. Instead, he stared out into the courtyard, where sand had begun to veil the stone steps. The sky blazed red, gloriously cruel. He remembered the gaunt face, the clouded eyes, and the honeyed voice of the old astrologer he met in the desert. "If it's a girl, your honor will turn to dust. She will be the final sigh of your legacy." The words repeated in Asif's mind like a cursed prayer. Then, the door creaked open. The midwife stepped out, beaming, a fragile life swaddled in a thin cloth in her arms. "It's a girl, sir." A bone-chilling silence fell. Asif didn't look at the child. His lips pressed tight. His hands clenched until they turned white. "Don't you want to see your child?" The midwife's voice trembled, as if she sensed the dark storm behind his stillness. "That is not my child," he replied. His voice soft as a breeze, yet carrying the weight of a death sentence. In the darkened room, Gulbadan held the baby girl close, afraid to weep. She had believed this child would bring them happiness. But she could never have imagined that this fragile life would be the excuse her beloved husband used to trample the very essence of humanity. "She cannot be allowed to live," Asif declared as he entered, his eyes cold, empty. "No, please," Gulbadan begged. She fell to her knees, her baby pressing into her chest as if sensing the danger closing in. But Asif remained unmoved. "If you won't do it, I will." Night fell over the city like a blanket woven from ash. Asif left the house as the moon rose, the baby wrapped in an old cloth. The cold wind slipped through his clothes, but he felt nothing. In his mind, only the astrologer's prophecy echoed, branding his thoughts like red-hot iron. At the forest's edge, where the tree branches tangled like a beast's open jaws, he stopped. He placed the baby on the ground, dug a shallow pit among the roots with his hands. They trembled as he gathered the first handfuls of earth. But just as the first grains fell onto the baby's face, a sound escaped her lips. It wasn't a cry. It was a whisper so faint, only those who had faced death could hear it. And Asif, if only for a second, felt a fracture in his soul. Yet, he continued. Up above, nestled among the high branches, a pair of eyes watched. It was a Bandaria, a female monkey holding her own baby. She didn't understand human speech, but she understood eyes. And Asif's eyes held no love. When he left, the monkey climbed down. With tiny claws, she brushed the soil away, uncovering the struggling infant. She looked at the child. The child looked back. One creature who couldn't speak. One who had never known the world. And in that moment, they breathed as one instinct, life, and a love that needed no name. The forest wind sighed like an old woman sweeping wet grass. Under the canopy of ancient trees, moonlight filtered through the leaves, lighting up the baby's dirt-covered face. Her cheeks bore faint claw marks, and her eyes, still wet, yet never once seen through love. Bandaria held the baby close. Her own baby monkey, small and peaceful, clung to her chest asleep. But when she looked at the human child, a strange feeling rose inside her. The wild instinct that had never accepted another species now softened, cracked, like the first drop of milk. She built a nest from leaves for the child. Her monkey on the left, the baby girl on the right. Every morning, she climbed trees to pick fruit, chewed it, and fed the girl, growing in silence. The baby smiled. Her first smiles were not for human parents, but for the monkey with her tangled fur and eyes wiser than any person's. She called out with baby babble, but in her eyes, it meant mother. Just that simple. A mother who didn't speak but knew how to hold. Each dusk, as the golden light filtered through the mist, the baby crawled, then stood guided by the hands of a monkey. Bundaraya didn't know why she did it. She just knew she must. Meanwhile, in a velvet-draped corner of the city, Asif believed the child was dead. He had no idea that burying his own blood had planted the first seed of a vast karma. A karma now being watered by the compassion of a creature mankind called lowly. He slept on silken pillows, surrounded by gold and jewels, yet his nights were restless. Each night, he heard a baby's cry, echoing from nowhere. Cold, haunting like the rumble of the earth when burying a soul that never learned to speak. 3 months later, the forest welcomed a strange guest. An old man with a white beard and a cloth satchel, Hakim Aslam, the healer who spent his life tending to humans, and listening to the whispers of plants. He had witnessed many wonders. But what he saw now made him stop in awe. A female monkey nursing a baby, cradling her as if she were her own. Hakim knelt not in emotion, but in reverence. He knew he had just seen something no king had ever witnessed. A living embodiment of boundless compassion. Under the great tree, Hakim Aslam stood still. His eyes, though aged, saw clearly with the calmness of a morning lake. And in that stillness, he witnessed a miracle. The monkey, her fur matted from mist and months of care, held the baby girl in her arms. No longer crying, the baby slept soundly, wrapped in warmth, safe from the cold earth that once tried to claim her. Hakim stepped closer, no cane, no words, just the gentle gaze of a father. Bundaraya looked at him. Her eyes weren't wild. Inside them was something most human parents lacked. Love, asking nothing in return. He knelt softly. His left hand rested on his chest in gratitude. "You saved a life humans chose to discard," he whispered. Bundaraya didn't understand the words. But she understood his heart. She didn't retreat. She lifted the child and brought her to him, a silent gesture. "Look at her. She is my daughter." He gently took the child. She was heavier than expected, not in body, but in the weight of her story. The scent of crushed leaves, the breath of milk, the faint scar on her neck, it all filled him with an unnamed sorrow. A child who survived by animal instinct. Yet perhaps, that instinct was closer to true compassion than anything in the human world. "I will take her with me," Hakim said. But as he turned to leave, he heard a rustle behind him. Bundaraya wasn't leaving. She didn't howl. She didn't cry. She simply followed, still holding her own baby, eyes fixed on the child now wrapped in white cloth. "You want to come with us?" he asked, surprised, moved. Bundaraya bowed her head. Not a gesture from the monkey world. But in the law of karma, it was the bow of a bodhisattva, unformed, unnamed, but deeply awakened. Hakim Aslam's house sat at the forest's edge, a modest hut with mud walls and a thatched roof, surrounded by a few wild herbs. He laid the baby on a clean cloth and gently washed her face with spring water. The baby didn't cry. She looked up at him with wide eyes that had seen forest shadows, wild beasts, and moonlight, before they had ever seen a human face. Bundaraya sat nearby, her monkey baby still clinging to her chest. Yet her hands caressed the human child as if both were born of her womb. The next morning, the old man placed his hand on the child's head. "You shall no longer be nameless like dust," he said. "From today on, I name you Mahnaaz." Mahnaaz, in the old tongue, meant, "she who is cherished by the moon." Bundaraya gently thumped her chest in agreement. She couldn't pronounce Mahnaaz, but from that day, even her cries softened as if she had learned to call her child by the name gifted by humankind. If you're still watching this video and think the name Mahnaaz is perfect for her as if it was meant just for her, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here. If you haven't subscribed yet, I invite you to hit subscribe and turn on the bell, so you won't miss any of our videos. Your support helps us keep creating inspiring stories like this one. Mornings, Hakim taught Mahnaaz to meditate beside the water pot, to cook herbal porridge. Afternoons, Bundaraya climbed trees for fruit, her monkey baby playing by Mahnaaz's feet. Evenings, the three lay on straw mats, listening to Hakim tell tales of souls, reincarnation, and a father who once lost a child. The girl didn't know that this father was the one who had once buried her alive. Years passed in the silence of the deep forest. A place where no one searched, no one remembered the baby once laid beneath the cold earth. Mahnaaz grew like a wildflower nourished by animal milk and the kind gaze of an old man. No cages. No praise. No anger. Only the purest breaths of living things coexisting in quiet harmony. Each morning, the girl ran to the stream, sunlight catching in her eyes still untouched by lies. The aging Bundaraya followed behind, carrying her monkey baby, bringing back bright red forest plums, washed and divided carefully. Hakim Aslam, hands wrinkled yet more tender than any lullaby, crushed leaves and roots to teach Mahnaaz how to heal wounds of beasts, of people, and one day, of broken souls. She didn't know how to read or write. But she remembered the scent of every herb, the taste of every fruit, and the way the afternoon breeze curled just before a storm. She could sit for hours beside a wounded bird without blinking. And when it flew again she smiled like a mother. Then one day, the sound of hooves echoed through the trees. It was a hot noon, sun hanging heavy above, forest leaves drooping like sleepy eyelids. Mahnaaz was grinding herbs when Bundaraya, startled, tugged her hand. Two riders passed through the forest path, a young man with two guards. The youth fell from his horse, groaning in pain. A poisonous insect bite had swollen his leg purple and raw. The guards panicked and ran for help. Mahnaaz rushed out. She didn't ask questions. She didn't flinch. She placed her hand on the swollen flesh, pulled a pouch from her side, mixed dried herbs with spring water, and applied the paste. The guards were stunned. The injured man opened his eyes and looked at Mahnaaz as if seeing true light for the first time. His name was Javed, the very son Asif had pinned all his glory and legacy upon. The boy raised with pride. The blood brother of Mahnaaz, though neither of them knew it. Javed was carried into the hut, laid on the mat that once cradled his sister's body after death was denied her. He didn't know any of that. All he saw was a girl in a rough cloth dress, hair tied with vines, hands trembling not from fear, but because he kept looking at her. "What's your name?" he asked. Mahnaaz paused. No one had asked her that except the old man. "Mahnaaz," she answered, soft as a falling leaf. Javed repeated the name like a sacred chant. It made his chest tighten. "I'm Javed." She didn't know that name had once been whispered by a trembling father in broken dreams. I have a son now, all will be glorious again. Within days, Javed's wound healed. Blood flowed, skin returned to color. But something deeper opened in his heart. A fracture untouched by any forest herb. He missed Mahnaaz. Missed her like a loss he never knew he had. When he returned to the palace, bringing tales of the girl who saved him, Asif sat silently. He never imagined that, after all these years, his son would find the daughter he once buried through such a twisted, cruel path. I want to marry her, Javed said. Asif laughed out loud. Marry a girl raised in the woods? Are you blind? You haven't seen her. But I saw mother's eyes in hers. And my heart knows who she is. Asif's eyes narrowed. He remembered something. Those eyes. Yes. The very same eyes that looked up once before the dirt fell. He knew. The girl was alive. He tried to stand, but it felt like an invisible hand clutched his heart. Everything he thought buried with the desert dust was back. Not as ghosts, but as karma, alive and burning. And worst of all, his own son, Javed, wanted to marry the sister he never knew existed. From that moment on, every step Asif took was a step through the minefield of his own making. And in Mahnaaz's heart, something unspoken had begun to stir. Like a dream ready to awaken in a storm. That evening, the air was unnaturally still. Leaves clung to branches as if glued. Mahnaaz sat by a small fire, pounding wild turmeric to bandage a wounded squirrel. Bundaraya sat beside her, gently combing Mahnaaz's hair, eyes aged but warm like dusk refusing to die. Then came the sound of hooves again, rising like a drum beat in the soul. Mahnaaz froze. She stepped onto the porch, where red dust swirled through the trees. A group of riders approached. At the front, a man in a blue silk robe, his face sharp, his gaze devoid of mercy. He was none other than Asif's envoy. He dismounted, glancing around, clearly in disbelief at where he stood. A humble mud hut in the wilderness, home to the wild girl his master's son now loved. A girl raised by an old healer and a mothering monkey. Mahnaaz stepped forward. Polite but did not bow. Sir, who are you looking for? The man pulled out a silk letter, sealed in gold. He spoke formally but with unmistakable arrogance. On behalf of the wealthiest merchant of Sham, Lord Asif, I have come to ask for your hand in marriage, for his son, Javed. The world went still. Bundaraya stiffened. Her eyes turned red. Mahnaaz had never seen her like that. Not afraid, but furious. Fierce. From behind, Hakim Aslam stepped out. He had heard everything. He looked at the envoy and said calmly, as if sharpening a stone long used. Asif, you say? Seeking Mahnaaz's hand. The envoy nodded, puzzled by the strange weight of the question. Hakim sighed. Tell him this. Mud walls are not meant to compare with gilded towers. Mahnaaz was born of the forest. She does not belong to gold or thrones. She is the wind. And no one marries the wind. The envoy flinched. He wanted to argue. But Hakim's eyes were too deep. After a few awkward words, the man turned his horse and left. The riders disappeared into the dusk, leaving behind a silence that was both weightless and suffocating. Mahnaaz turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. Why are they asking for my hand? Hakim looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were as clear as an old well, and he knew the time had come. He stepped inside the hut and returned with a worn cloth, carefully wrapped inside a wooden box. It was the headscarf she had been wrapped in when he first found her. He opened it and held it out to her. "My child, it's time you learned the truth." And so, he told the story. The night long ago of a merchant who feared losing his honor more than he feared losing his child. Of a baby girl buried beneath the cold earth. Of a mother monkey who unearthed her, cradled her, and raised her on wild milk and untamed love. Mahnaaz was silent. Her mind blank. Her heartbeat irregular. No tears fell, but her soul folded in on itself, shrinking into a grain of dust. My father," she stammered, "is a Sif." Hakim nodded. "And Javed? Your brother?" No blade could cut deeper than that. There was no blood, but Mahnaaz's spirit fractured. Every memory twisted. Javed's smile. His gentle gaze. The first stirrings of her heart. Now, a broken melody. A song gone wrong from the very first note. Bundaraya came close, placing a hand on her shoulder. As if she alone could keep Mahnaaz from collapsing. This girl, who once survived death, now trembled beneath the weight of truth. Hakim Aslam placed a hand on her head, his voice as grounded as the earth. "You are not your father's sin. You don't carry his debt. You are a flower that grew from a severed root. And even flowers in graveyards can bloom with fragrance." Mahnaaz looked up at him. Her eyes had no tears, but they were deep. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel nameless. She was a forgotten memory. A flame no one wanted to light, yet one no one could put out. She turned toward the fading trail where the envoy had disappeared into dust. "If my father doesn't know I live, then let me be the one to return that knowledge to him with my own hands." And Mahnaaz's eyes, once buried beneath the soil, now blazed like a star awakened in an ancient cemetery. The next morning, the sun had barely kissed the treetops when soft knocks fell on the bamboo door of Hakim Aslam's hut. Mahnaaz, spooning porridge into the mouth of a squirrel with burnt paws, froze. She already knew it wasn't a stranger. Javed stood at the entrance. Alone. No escort. No sword. Just a pair of longing eyes and a clumsily bundled bouquet of wildflowers tied with grass. He stepped into the small courtyard, moving slowly, like in a dream, his gaze fixed only on Mahnaaz. "I came myself, to ask for your promise." His words made Hakim pause mid-grind, mortar in hand. Bundaraya narrowed her eyes, her fur bristling, sensing something was off. Mahnaaz didn't rise. She simply set the bowl down and looked straight at Javed. But her eyes, they were not the same as the girl who once blushed under his gaze. They were the eyes of someone who had just touched the edge of truth. "What promise, my lord?" Javed froze. Her words were formal. His heart sank. "The promise, that you'll be my wife." Mahnaaz smiled softly. But it wasn't a gentle smile. "My lord, do you know that a younger brother cannot marry his sister?" Javed's face went pale, as if struck. What did you say?" "I am your sister, Javed." "Same father. Different mother. The father you proudly name, is the man who buried me alive when I was still red and crying." Javed stumbled back a step, as if tree roots had suddenly clutched at his ankles. He looked at Hakim, searching for denial. But the old man simply looked downward, silent, like a monk who had just finished chanting over a soul about to shatter. "No, it can't be," Javed gasped. Mahnaaz stood and stepped forward. Her frame was slight, but each step echoed like ancient drums. "It can. Because sin doesn't need the victim's permission to exist." My father couldn't. Your father, Javed, valued honor more than blood. When he laid the first handful of dirt over me, he didn't look into my eyes. And even now, he's never looked at me to ask for forgiveness. Her voice didn't tremble. No tears. Only the cold fire of souls long abandoned. Javed lowered his head. Then, what am I to you? A brother. Nothing more. Nothing less. He fell to his knees, still clutching the wild flowers. Forgive my father, if you can. His guilt is not mine to forgive. It belongs to him. He must bow before the heavens. Before the creature he once despised. A monkey who did what no human dared. She saved his child. She turned and walked inside, leaving Javed alone in the courtyard, where even the dried leaves sounded like things breaking. Bundaraya followed her, eyes misted. She couldn't speak, but in every gentle touch, every soft lick, Mahnaaz felt it all. Love. Pain. Loyalty without promise. That night, Javed didn't leave. He sat by the courtyard tree, staring at the sky, the flowers wilting in his hands. And in his heart, a mountain had collapsed. The next morning, he left. Without a word. Without a glance back. But from that moment on, the world he once knew, of riches, honor, and power, was no longer big enough for a heart that had split open. If you're still watching and you feel the pain Mahnaaz and her brother endured, please comment 7 below to let us know you're here. And if you haven't yet, we invite you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Your support helps us keep sharing stories that heal, awaken, and inspire. Asif slammed his palm against the marble table. The porcelain teacup shattered, its contents splashing like blood across the gold-tiled floor. They rejected me, he growled, his voice no longer human, but the hiss of a serpent cornered in its lair. The envoy knelt, pale, sweat dripping down his spine. He stammered, eyes on the floor. Yes, my lord. Hakim Aslam said. Mahnaaz cannot marry Lord Javed, because she is your daughter. Silence. A pause so deep, it seemed to suck all air from the room. Then Asif laughed. Dry. Twisted. Like dead wood splitting in a blazing furnace. Daughter? What daughter? She died. But sir, the envoy faltered, she didn't. The laughter stopped. Like a noose pulled tight. Asif stepped back, not from fear, but because something in his chest had burst open. A door. A cry buried with earth. A pair of eyes that once looked up at him just before the dirt fell. She's alive? Raised by a beast? Nurtured by an old, nameless man? And now, she dares reject him. He collapsed into his chair, eyes burning. As if stripped naked before the gods of pride. No, he muttered. She cannot live. She is living proof of my sin. She is the blood stain that never dried. Then came a thought. Colder than anything he had ever done. He summoned a loyal soldier. One who had killed for him. Silenced traitors. Never asked questions. Find the girl. Kill her. Leave no trace. Bring me her eyes. Yes, my lord. The command dropped like a curse. The hall was silent, save for Asif and the stillness of stone statues along the walls. But if one looked closely, they would have seen the curtain behind him tremble. Behind that curtain stood Gulbadan. Frozen. Heart pounding. Years ago, she believed her daughter was dead. Asif's cold return from the forest silenced every question in her throat. But now, she heard it with her own ears. Her daughter's lives. And the man she once loved, wants to kill her. Again. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She turned, stepped quietly into a dark room, and opened a chest. Inside was the cloth she once wrapped her newborn in. It was still there. Still stained with the first drops of milk she ever expressed to feed her baby. She collapsed, clutching it to her chest. My daughter is alive. And I will not let her die again. At that same moment, Mahnaaz was boiling water in the courtyard. Inside the hut, Hakim Aslam lay coughing, each wheeze scraping his throat and her heart. He had weakened noticeably since learning the truth had been exposed. Bundaraya remained by her side always, though her eyes were dimming, her steps slower than before. Mahnaaz knew. Everything was about to change. That evening wind carried a scent she'd never smelled before. The sharp tang of metal. The musk of freshly tanned leather. And something else, poison. Soaked in the roots of Kora, a plant that did not grow in these woods. She lowered the kettle. Her fingers clenched tight. A predator was coming. But this time, the prey would not lie still beneath the soil. The moon rose early that night. A crescent like a claw etched into the dark sky. The wind stirred. Leaves rustled not from season, but from movement. Something was entering the forest. Something that carried the scent of unshed blood, and the breath of death carefully rehearsed. Mahnaaz didn't sleep. She sat in the dark, eyes fixed on the edge of the clearing. Inside the hut, Hakim coughed violently. Bundaraya held him in her arms, like a silent nurse. The wind shifted again. The unmistakable scent of Kora root used by southern hunters to paralyze with a single arrow, tightening the blood vessels until breath ceased. The killer had arrived. But he didn't know. The girl he was ordered to kill was no longer the infant left in a shallow grave. She was Mahnaaz, raised on warm monkey milk, healed by the love of a forgotten old man. The assassin crept silently through the tall grass. In his hand, a long, sleek black dagger. Its metallic tang alone could chill the spine. He didn't speak. He didn't hesitate. He had killed 30 before without blinking. A girl from the forest meant nothing to him. But tonight, he had miscalculated one thing. Just as he stepped past the final bush, a gust of wind sliced past his ear. And before the dagger could rise, a small hand clamped onto his wrist and twisted it back. No scream. No warning. No hesitation. He hit the ground, stunned for only a moment. Then he kicked toward her midsection. Mahnaaz stepped back just in time. Her eyes flashed in the moonlight. Not from rage, but from something deeper. The calm realization that she was no longer the hunted. She was the survivor, and survivors have the right to defend their breath. They struggled in the dark. His blade whistled through the air, slicing death into the shadows. But Mahnaaz held no blade. She used what the forest had given her. A bamboo stick. Ash from the fire. Powdered bark. A handful of spicy powder flared into the assassin's eyes. He stumbled. Mahnaaz struck his shoulder. He shrieked but didn't fall. He was a predator, hardened by cruelty. Then, a howl tore through the night. Bundaraya. She leapt like lightning. No sword, no claws, just the body of an aging monkey, eyes glowing with ghost fire. She latched onto his face and bit deep into his ear. He howled. Dropped the blade. In an instant, Mahnaaz picked it up and turned it. against his throat. His breath came fast. For the first time in years, this killer felt death approaching. From the hands of a girl without name or title. Her voice thundered like the storm trees. If I kill you, I become like him. But if I spare you, then take this life back to the one who ordered death. He said nothing. She pressed the blade across his cheek, just a hairline cut. Enough to bleed. Enough that when his master saw it, he would understand. The girl once buried had risen. And this time no one would bury her again. Mahnaaz stepped back. Bundaraya snarled once more, then returned to the hut. The assassin crawled to his feet. His hands shook not from pain, but because for the first time, mercy had spared him. He vanished into the forest. Mahnaaz stood still, knife still in hand, eyes moist not from fear, but from having chosen forgiveness, when she had every reason to choose vengeance. Behind her, Hakim was awake. He had seen everything. He said nothing, only nodded. She had grown. Not by weapons, but by the decision to preserve the light within. She stepped inside, set the knife on the table, took his hand, and whispered, "I'm not the abandoned child anymore. I am the one who now holds life in the same hands once buried beneath the earth." That afternoon, Asif sat in the grand hall, eyes half shut, turning a golden late teacup. Outside, clouds gathered. The wind tasted of storms not yet born. The doors slammed open. The assassin entered, holding a small wrapped cloth. He bowed low, said nothing, and offered the bundle with both hands. Asif unwrapped it. Two eyes, blood-soaked and crimson, rested on the cloth. He stared. No tremble. No surprise. Just a crooked smile, half relief, half satisfaction. Finally, it's done. But in the corner of the room, someone could no longer stay silent. Gulbadan stepped out from the shadows. She was small, but her eyes had just awakened from a long slumber. She looked at Asif, then at the cloth in his hands. She didn't need to inspect it. A mother knows. These are not Mahnaaz's eyes. Her voice was calm, but each word stabbed into Asif's heart. He squinted. "What did you say?" I looked into her eyes the day she was born. They were storm gray. When she cried, her pupils shrank like a wild cub's. These are not those eyes. The room fell heavy. Even the guards exchanged uncertain glances. Asif sprang to his feet, fists clenched. "Are you accusing me?" "No," Gulbadan replied. "I'm saving you. If you believe she's dead, you'll keep living in pride. But if you know she's alive, you'll be forced to face yourself, every single day." Asif opened his mouth, but no words came. He grabbed the cloth and hurled it to the floor. Blood splattered. Red stains spread across white marble like unassailable karma. He screamed. "Lies. All of it. I gave the order. I ended it." Gulbadan didn't flinch. "Do you know what hurts me most, Asif? Not that you once buried our daughter, but that when she came back to life, you wanted her to die again." Asif staggered back, as if the entire palace crumbled beneath him. The wind outside shrieked. A curtain flew up, revealing a large mirror. And in it, he saw himself. Not a powerful merchant. Not a father. Just a man who had long ago dug a grave for his own soul. That evening, Javed returned after a week of searching for Mahnaaz across the land. At the gate, the guards whispered. "Your father is unwell. Your mother hasn't spoken to anyone. Strangers have been coming and going since morning." He walked into his mother's room first. Gulbadan was sewing a small tunic. The cloth was old, but the stitches were meticulous. On the table, the old baby cloth once wrapped around Mahnaaz lay freshly washed and folded. "I know," Javed whispered. "I know everything now. She is Mahnaaz." Gulbadan didn't look up. Her hands kept stitching. "You're late. But not too late. Your father is." "I need to do something, Mother," Javed said, voice trembling. "I can't keep living without redeeming what my blood has carried." She set the tunic down. Looked him in the eye for the first time, not as a boy. "Then do what's right, Javed. Don't love her because she's your sister. Love her because she is the truth. I want to see her. No. Not with empty hands. What should I bring?" She stood, opened a drawer, and retrieved an object. A simple necklace made from dry bark, with a small, cloudy stone in its center. "Your sister made this with her own hands. When you were born, I hid it. Now, take it to her. As your first apology." Javed took the necklace. In his hand, it felt as light as ash, but burned like hot iron. A memory once erased from the family's story. Now the only thing he had left. To make something whole again. Javed told no one. He rode alone, leaving just before dawn. The sky was still wrapped in a bluish mist, and the last stars faded into the waking light. In his hand was the bark necklace. With every beat of the horse's hooves, with every gust of wind slapping his face, he felt smaller, strangely humbled. He who once lived in silk and power, who believed he had the right to choose whatever he wanted, now wished for only one thing: to stand before his sister. Not to ask for forgiveness, but simply to acknowledge that she had once existed. Throughout the journey, he thought of the first days he met Mahnaaz. Her simple beauty. Eyes lit with the glow of deep forests. Hands that healed not with herbs but with presence. He remembered those sleepless nights when unknowingly he had loved his own sister with a blind, faded heart. That shame didn't kill him, but it changed him forever. After 3 days of riding through forested trails, he arrived. The little hut still rested halfway up the mountainside, cradled in deep green trees and the sound of trickling water. No smoke from the stove. No sounds. Only a stillness like a place where no one lived anymore. Javed dismounted. He knocked on the door barehanded. 3 times. No response. He took a breath. Pushed the door open. Inside, muted light seeped through the thatched roof. Hakim Aslam lay on a bamboo bed, his head on a bundle of dried roots. He opened his eyes. Not surprised. Not joyful. He looked as though he had expected this all along. "You've come," he rasped. "I want to see her. You're no longer a boy. No. And no longer someone who can love blindly, not knowing who he hurts." Hakim gestured behind him. "She's at the stream. Every evening, Mahnaaz goes there, to wash the wounds that don't bleed. Perhaps today, she's waiting for you." Javed nodded, hand tightening around the necklace. He walked slowly, feet rustling in the dry leaves. Every step toward the stream was a step away from everything he once believed. Then, he saw her. Mahnaaz sat by the water, mending a frayed sleeve. Her hair was tied up. Her brown dress draped over one shoulder. Beside her, Bandaria older now sat silently, like a shadow of time. She looked up. No startle. No turning away. Just a gaze. You came, she said. I brought this, Javed answered, laying the necklace before her light as a brittle twig. Mahnaaz looked at it. Then at him. Her eyes held no hatred. But no warmth either. They were mirrors reflecting a truth beyond words. I made this, for a brother I'd never met. Javed bowed his head. I met you, without knowing who I was. And I lived, not knowing someone else had lived in the place my life should have held in our parents' hearts. The wind passed by, lifting ash from a nearby fire into the stream. Bandaria stepped forward, picked up the necklace, and placed it in Mahnaaz's hand. As if she knew this was the moment to complete what had been left unfinished. Javed sat. For the first time, he didn't look at her as the dream he once cherished. But as a wound, he longed to heal. With truth. With acknowledgement. I didn't come for your forgiveness. I came to say. My sister is alive. And she once saved me. From the blindest part of myself. Mahnaaz said nothing. She stared at the stream. Then dipped the necklace into it. The stone sparkled beneath the sunlight. We can't go back, she whispered. But if you want to move forward, then go forward as one who carries light. Not to erase wrongs, but to illuminate the path. So others won't repeat what your father once did. Javed nodded. He stood. No hug. No grasp of hands. No whispered sister. Only a deep, solemn bow. She stood too, walking back toward Hakim. Her silhouette faded into the trees like evening smoke light as mist, yet lingering like scent on memory. 1 year later. Asif died on a rainy night. Unnoticed. Gulbadan left the estate. She now lived quietly in a small house near an old temple. Every day, she wrote a single line in her journal. My daughter lives. And her light did not go out. Javed never married. He opened a small healing post in the woods. He studied under forest healers. He often visited Hakim for guidance. And Mahnaaz. She never returned to the palace. Never wore a crown. Never entered halls of power again. But deep forest travelers still speak of a woman who lives with a monkey. Eyes that seem to understand confessions. Hands that soothe pain, without medicine. They don't know her name. They only call her the girl who survived the earth. And they say, her light still burns. Not to banish darkness, but to remind us, anyone can be reborn. If just one soul, even a monkey, chooses to hold them. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share one thing this story taught you, and how you'll carry it into your life. Your voice matters. Reading your reflections brings strength, healing, and inspiration to us all. If this story moved your heart, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue crafting stories that awaken the soul. Thank you for watching. And we'll see you in the next video.